Okay, in this video we are looking at Unit 10, Lesson 1, Introduction to Exponential Functions. These are the notes that we took the other day. So basically a function that has a variable in the exponent is what we call an exponential function. So it's something times something raised to a power. So for example, 2 times 4 being raised to the x power, or 200 times 2 being raised to an x power are examples of what it would look like. Your y-intercept is when the value of x is 0. So if I replace this x with a 0, 4 raised to the 0 power is 1, and 1 times 2 is 2. So this number here ends up being your y-intercept. Your base is your multiplier, the thing that causes y to change, and that is the 2 here in this example. If it's bigger than 1, it's growth. If it's a fraction, then it is decay. So here we have the general form for our exponential function. The a, as we just said, is the y-intercept, because when x is 0, this part becomes 1, so a is what's left. A in a word problem is your initial value or your starting point. The b is the base, because it is what's being raised to a power. It is what causes a change, either growth, so something is increasing from the left to right, or decay, something is decreasing from left to right. Your domain for exponential functions is always all real numbers. Your range is always, for Algebra 1, y is greater than 0, so all real numbers greater than 0. We have this new term called an asymptote. And basically it's a border that the graph comes really close to but never touches or goes past. So for Algebra 1, that's always going to be the line y equals 0. That's why our range is always everything bigger than 0. So this horizontal line here is our asymptote. So here we have the equation y equals 10 times 0.5 raised to the x power. Here's our graph. A is the number in front here, the 10. That is also your y-intercept. B is what's being raised to the x power, so that's 0.5, and that is your base. So A is the y-intercept all the time, B is the base all the time. Your asymptote is always y equals 0. Your domain is always all real numbers. Your range is always y is greater than 0. These three will not change for Algebra 1. This particular graph is decreasing. All right, so we also have a case sometimes where b is equal to 1 plus r, where r is a rate of change like a percentage. So you're going to take 1 plus whatever that percent is to get your b. So here we have growth because the b is 1 plus something. It's bigger than 1. 2 is greater than 1, so we have growth. A would be our y-intercept. Your asymptote would be at y equals 0. Here we also have growth in this table because we can see this is getting bigger. We know that it's exponential because 1/2 times 2 is 1, 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4. As long as this multiplier is exactly the same, then you have an exponential, and if it's getting bigger, then you have growth. For decay, what we have is b is going to be a fraction, so you're going to have 1 minus some decimal, which is going to give you a fractional answer. So in this case, b is 1/2, so 1/2 is less than 1, so that makes it fall into this category here, so it's a fraction, so you have decay. A again is your y-intercept, and your asymptote is y equals 0. From a table, we can see decay because it's going down. In particular, 3 divided by 3 is 1. 1 divided by 3 is 1/3. 1/3 divided by 3 is 1/9. However, we can't use division. It needs to be multiplication. But remember that division is nothing more than a fraction, because this means 1 divided by 3. So it's times 1/3, times 1/3, times 1/3. 1/3 is less than 1. It's a fraction, so this is decay. In this example here, we have these points that are on our curve. How do you get from 8 to 4? you divide by 2, but division is not what we want. We want multiplication. So division by 2 is the same as multiplying by 1/2. So our multiplier is 1/2. So b ends up to be 1/2. Right here is where it crosses the y-axis. So 0, 1 is our y-intercept. So a is equal to 1. And then we simply put those into the general form. A is 1, b is 1/2, being raised to the x power. For a word problem, John has 10 DVDs. He plans to triple, which means 3, triple the number of DVDs in his collection each year. Write the equation that represents the exponential function. So I need to identify A and B. A is your initial or starting point. He started with 10 DVDs. How did it change? He's going to multiply by 3, so that's why B is 3. Your y-intercept is the same as A, it's 10. Base is the same as B, it's 3. Substitute those values into the general form. A is 10, B is 3, and you get this equation, y equals 10 times 3 to the x power. So these are some of the basic things that you know about exponential functions, and please remember that the asymptote is always y equals 0, the domain is always all real numbers, and the range is always y is greater than 0.